Welcome to Save on Plants. In this info video, we're going to discuss the different options that are available to you with respect to upright cedars that are commonly used for either separation points or for privacy. We'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of the different varieties. Cedars are one of the most common plants grown on residential or commercial properties. They offer many of the features desired, such as quick growing, privacy, and cost effectiveness. While we sell over 20 varieties of cedars ourselves, in this video we will focus on the most popular and practical ones, especially again for cedars that are being used for hedging, that is separation points, or for privacy. Cedars are one of the best options with respect to cost effectiveness, but the cost can add up quickly, so be sure to know your options and to deal with someone trustworthy. Some plant retailers are in it for the gravy months of May to June and then disappear for the rest of the year. It is best to deal with someone that is available and capable to assist you at any time of the year should you need advice. Cedars are not very forgiving. Adjustments to conditions such as watering need to be made immediately and cannot wait until the next year for direction. In fact, you should contact the seller as soon as even one cedar starts to look a little off color, even if the others look great. The one that is starting to look faded may be a sign that the conditions, such as watering, may need adjusting. If you don't get good advice quickly, the rest may start to fail one at a time. Never delay. Contact us right away if you suspect any problems with the plants, and that's even if it's just one plant. Best time to plant cedars is either in late April or early May, as well as early September. May is okay, but extra precautions should be taken. Early September should be only pot grown versus balled and burlapped, also known as B and B.
There are many different types of cedars that you could be using for hedges. The most popular one are the emerald cedars. So these are ones you'll see commonly in subdivisions. The reason for their popularity is that they are narrow and they're a low maintenance plant in terms of having to prune or shear them to keep them tight looking. You can pretty well just leave them alone, and they always look neat and tidy. They do have a nice deep emerald color, and they're pretty hardy. Another group that we grow is called the Brandon, Pyramid, or Brabant. There are actually three distinct varieties, but we use the term interchangeably in the industry because they're almost all identical. And they do belong to the eastern white cedar family, which is not to be confused with the swamp cedars, which actually belong to that same family, except they look much different. Swamp cedars are very sparse looking, almost like a Charlie Brown tree, and for that reason we don't even grow them. Now, as far as the benefits of this group is they are pretty fast growing. They do make a solid hedge. However, our experience has shown that they're not the hardiest or the most predictable in terms of survivability. And for a range of reasons, it's almost hit and miss when you're using this variety of plant. And while we still do grow them and we still do sell them, we're not recommending them very strongly. We probably prefer or would recommend that you consider the black cedar, which I'll speak about in a few minutes. Another group is the green giant or excelsa cedars. These belong to the red cedar family. These are by far the fastest growing cedars. They can grow up to 3 feet a year. However, they keep on growing. So for a lot of people, they're going to be too large for the property size that they have. If you have anything, we'll say under a 1/4 acre, they're probably going to be a little bit too large for your area. Now, the excelsa is not as large as a green giant. Excelsa is about half the width and about, we'll say, 3/4 the height of the tree. But even with an excelsa, you can be looking at 10 or 12 feet across if you don't prune them. So if you've got a tight area, you're going to have to be doing quite a bit of pruning, and a lot of people are not going to want that. So like I said, if you got a 1/4 acre lot or larger, these would be good options, and you might as well just go with the excelsa because the green giants are going to take up twice as much room as the excelsas down the road. And they both grow very quickly. The difference is the green giants just keep on growing. They don't stop. They, like I say, they go right to 50 feet tall, so they're quite huge. Another benefit of this variety, the red cedars, is that they're deer resistant. So if you're planting or if your lot is near a wood lot or large trees in the area where there's deer that may habitat in there, this is definitely the variety of cedar that you want to consider because they'll eat the other ones like salad, where they pretty well stay away from the red cedar ones. One of our favorite cedars is the black cedar, has all the benefits of the eastern white cedars, which I mentioned earlier, the Brandon, Pyramid, Brabant family, except that they're extremely hardy. These are probably the hardiest cedars of all the different options you have. They do create a very solid barrier, and they're a nice deep green. So they're one of the most attractive cedars. I really like them, especially if you want that wall look where you can't distinguish one tree from the other. They just all blend in together. They're a very good option. They don't get too wide. You're probably looking at 3.5, 4 feet across max. So they will fit well in a lot of subdivisions. However, on the downside, they are more expensive than the other cedars by the foot. But again, it's not ridiculously more. You're probably looking at about 15% more in cost versus an emerald cedar. Another variety is called the DeGroots cedar, and people have tried to make hedges with these, but we don't recommend it. They only grow about 1.5 feet wide, and they're also a tapered shape, so you'd have to plant them extremely close together, and they're never really going to give you a privacy wall. They'll give you a separation line at best. These are generally recommended and used for as a standalone tree, an accent tree inside a group of other plants that are, say, lower and shorter, or up against a house entrance, etc. But as far as making a hedge or even a separation line, this may not be your best choice. Another variety I don't have listed here is called the golden cedar. We do sell these. These are upright varieties and glow, but the uprights could be used as a hedge. They grow about 10 feet tall, about 4 feet wide, and planted in full sun, they do get a deep gold yellow color. If they're only in partial sun, they're not quite as gold or yellow, but they will have still that tinge of yellowness to them and can be attractive. Not commonly used as hedges, but really no reason why you couldn't.
Now let's look a little more specifically at the individual varieties of cedars. In this photograph here, these are all emeralds, and this is actually one of our farms, but if you were doing a separation line, this would be the look you'd have after several years. Each plant is standing by itself, totally separate from the other one. There's no contact between them, and you can walk between the individual plants. So if you're looking for a separation line, this is what we're talking about. This is what it will look like down the road. Now you can see that they're tight and they're pointy, and again their attractiveness is that emerald green color that they have. Here's a hedge that we put in. These are 5-foot emeralds at 30-inch centers, and again, this is going to grow into a privacy hedge, but you will be able to tell or count how many cedars are there even 10 or 15 years down the road, because they will maintain their pointy tip. If you start to cut them square like a hedge, a wall, you'll have to sacrifice quite a bit of the plant to get down to that point where it does give you a square hedge or a wall appearance. So keep that in mind. And as I said, these are the most popular for hedges, even though they don't give you that true wall effect that the other varieties will give you. But for whatever reason, personal preferences, etc., these are the most popular cedars used for hedges. Here's some more sample sizes. Should point out here, whenever we say, for example, the emerald on the left side is 4.5 feet, we are referring to the actual plant above the ground. So if you were to plant that one in the ground, it would be 4.5 feet above the ground. We do not include the root ball, the size of or the depth of the pot, etc. Some garden centers will tell you that it's a 4.5-foot plant. Once it's in the ground, it's actually only 3 feet tall. So keep that in mind, that whenever we make any references to the size of any plant, not just cedars, we only talk about the height above the ground. We do not include the root ball. I should point out too, on the far right, we threw a Brandon in there, just so you can see there's a little bit of a difference between the Brandon and the emeralds. The Brandons are a little bit shaggier looking, a little bit more square, where the emeralds tend to have a little bit more of a point to them. Here's a photograph of a 2-gallon. This is the size of the pot. It's the standard that in the industry is they call that a 2-gallon. Don't ask me why, but that is considered to be a 2-gallon size pot. And the plant itself is about 3 feet tall. These sizes are not grown in fields. These are grown right from scratch in the pots. And if you pull that root ball out, you'll see there's lots of nice roots there. So it is an effective way of growing these plants. It gives you a nice size full root ball and a light soil. So they're very easy to move around, very light. You'll see that our field cedars, which is an excellent way of growing them, do have heavy root balls because they're grown in heavy soil, which gives you strong roots for your cedars and higher survivability once you go plant them. So that's one of the advantages of field grown versus, say, light soil in a pot. But when you get down to the small sizes, there is no option. You have to go with a pot. Just make sure that it's pot grown from scratch so that you have a full root system for that tree. And now this is a 1-gallon. We do even have smaller ones, which we call 1-gallon. Sorry, this is a 2-gallon, and what we do have is a smaller size called a 1-gallon, and they would be about 20 inches. Here's a photograph of some Brandons, and these are balled and burlapped, which is the most common way we sell our cedars. This means that they're field grown, and in our case, we cultivate the roots properly. We root prune them every year, which cuts back the roots, allowing a more fibrous growth with the remaining roots that are in the soil. Many places don't do this anymore because of the cost, but we've continued to do that with ours. Another thing you'll notice about ours that are balled and burlapped, we do not treat our material. It's very common in the industry now to treat the material so that it has a longer shelf life, and they'll use either arsenic or copper sulfate, which can be toxic, on the material, and this stops the material from degrading. But this is a double-edged sword. While it gives you longer shelf life of the material, and you can keep it in your yard for a longer period of time without it breaking apart, the drawback there is that it constrains the roots from growing because the material does not break down. And we don't use this material, but we've heard that people that have dug up an older tree, even after several years, that material has not broken down and the roots never made it through the particular burlap bag. So with our bags, they're not treated, and we dig all of our trees at the end of March, which is when you should be digging them, and we burlap them right away, of course. And within about a month, month and a half, that burlap is disintegrating. And so that's when you want them in the ground before that starts to break apart. The perfect timing, because early May is when the roots of the cedars actually start to spread out and secure themselves in their new home. Here's a photograph of a black cedar. As you can see, the coloring of the leaves is a little bit darker than the white cedar family. By white cedars, I'm talking about the Brandons, Brabants, and the pyramid cedars. You can see that they got the same type of leaf configuration in terms of being a little bit on the shaggy side. The overall shape of the tree is more rectangular. And our real-world experience has shown they actually grow just as fast as white cedars, even though a lot of the readings that we've done on the internet would say that the white cedars are a faster growing one. That actually has not been our experience, at least not in the Niagara, Toronto area. With our weather conditions, they seem to grow just as fast. Some of our customers have reported up to a foot and a half a year once they're established, which is a very, very good rate of growth for the cedars. This is in comparison, say, to an emerald cedar that might only grow about 9 inches a year in our area. So in terms of growth, they are quite quick. Excellent privacy because of their shape, and their color is extremely attractive. That is a deep green. And the last point, which makes them a good choice, is how hardy they are. They are, without a doubt, the hardiest cedar. So we are definitely encouraging black cedars to our customers. They're an excellent option for somebody that wants privacy with a reasonably fast-growing option. They don't grow as fast as the red cedars, which are the green giants and the excelsa. Then again, most people don't have the room for a red cedar. Their yards are just too small. The black cedars have, that typical 4 to 5 foot at the base width, which is similar with all the cedars, the emeralds, the Brandons, etc. So in terms of size-wise, it will fit most subdivisions or backyards. You don't have to have a huge property to accommodate the black cedars. Here's a photograph of a green giant. This one here is about 25-30 feet tall, and it has a lot more room to grow. It's going to be about a 40 or 50 foot plant, and will reach almost twice as wide as it is right now. So you can see how it's not very practical for subdivisions. You again have to have at least a quarter or half acre sized lot to use these type of trees. Excelsa is a better option if you're really set on a fast growing cedar and you have enough room to accommodate, say, a 8 to 10 foot hedge in terms of diameter. Here's an excelsa hedge that was pruned beautifully. You can see it came out really nice. It's a beautiful hedge. The last variety that we're going to discuss with as far as separation points or hedges is going to be the DeGroots cedar. Again, we do carry these, and we will discourage you from buying them because of their high failure rate, but there's a demand for them, and taking the proper precautions, you will have a reasonable survivability of them. However, if you want to avoid any problems, stay away from DeGroots cedars. They do have that nice, tight, tall look that people like. They are nice in terms of their appearance, stand alone. Again, the big drawback is that they tend not to be as hardy, and they are a little more expensive by foot when you're purchasing them. These basically in the photograph are almost full grown. Those are about 8 or 9 footers, and 10 feet is about as tall as DeGroots will grow. Here's a photograph that we took when we delivered to one of our customers. He was ripping out his previous year's project, which is the swamp cedars that he purchased off someone else, and he was going to replace them with Brandons that he bought off of us. Now, if you take a look along his fence there, the majority of those did not do very well. The far right, you see a couple that did what they're supposed to do as far as swamp cedars. It looks like they had probably grown a foot or two since the previous year, and they're green. But you can see right through them. You can see the fence as if they're not even there. These ones here were planted at about 20-inch centers. The people that sell these will probably tell you to plant them at 1-foot centers. Again, because they are so sparse, you don't really get any. They don't fill in nicely. And again, the successful ones are the ones on the far right. That's what they look like when they work out well. So keep that in mind whenever you're looking around and you're thinking about buying white cedars. They generally do not have any soil on their root system, or if they do, they have an extremely small root ball. So some people now are putting them into pots and that, but generally overall they are sold with very small root systems and sometimes no dirt on them at all. As mentioned earlier, whenever we refer to the size of our plants, we are referring to the actual size of the plant above the ground. This one in this picture, or this group in the picture here, these are 8 footers, and again, we do not include the root ball in the size of that plant. Now, a question that often we are asked is, why do cedars have such a high failure rate? Well, it's quite simple. The main reason cedars fail is because of the roots. If the roots are not properly cultivated, if they weren't properly pruned, if you're not given enough of the root system with the tree itself, or if they're not handled properly. In other words, they can be dropped when they're getting moved around. You crack the root balls like cracking an egg. The thing's dead. And so the number one reason is roots. And for the most part, this is not within the control of the customer. The customer has very little control, and in fact, in most cases, cannot even tell what kind of roots he's getting. But that is the reason why most cedars fail. And historically, it was a lot of the big box stores that were doing this with the plants, the cedars. They were contracting people, squeezing them on the price, and so the growers just kept giving them less and less. And the current system that's out there is that they get a very minimal root ball. In fact, what they do is they cut the roots off really small. When they're in the field, they shake the dirt off of the root system, and then they ship them that way. Because one of our 90-pound cedars, if we did that to it, it would only weigh about 10 pounds. So you're knocking off 80-90% of the weight by using that technique of cutting a small root ball and then knocking the dirt off of it. This does several things. The remaining roots dry out. When you knock the dirt off, you actually damage the small root fibers, which are the most important ones for sucking up the nutrients in the water for the cedar. And the cedar will look fine for a couple of months, but it's already dead. You don't know it. And it's because it takes quite a while before the cedar will actually show you it's dead, even though it is dead. That's why one of the problems there is with cedars, if they look good, customers think, well, they don't need to be watered, which is totally wrong. You can't wait till a cedar tells you it's in trouble. If you do, it's probably too late. Do not wait till cedars start to pale on you before you start watering them. Follow the schedule that we give you, and it's going to depend on your soil, drainage, slopes, etc., size of plant, and watering method that you use. But we will give you specific instructions, and you follow those instructions even if the cedar looks great. You stick with the schedule. Again, a lot of people say, well, I'll wait till the plant tells me it needs water. Cedars are not like that. They will not tell you they need water. They will tell you they're dead. The second most common problem, as I've already referred to, is watering. Customers are just not watering properly, or in some cases are not watering enough, and in a few cases will actually water too much. They've got very heavy soil, it doesn't drain well, or it's along a patio or a driveway, runoff, downspout from a house, and it's getting too much water. So you have to know the right amount of water, and again, we will give you a specific instructions based on your situation, because everybody's situation is different. You can't have a blanket method for watering cedars. You have to do what's called a test hole, and we will cover that later on. The third reason plants may die, or cedars would die, is just planting method. People planting them at the wrong time of the year, or not being careful when they're planting them, damaging the root ball, not loosening the roots, etc. Location is another problem. Cedars need at least 4 hours of sun a day. As well, they should not be planted anywhere near large trees, because the large trees, their roots are spread out as far as the canopy of that tree. So you may be planting 5-6 feet away from a trunk of a tree, but the roots are where that cedar is, and even though you don't see any roots there, the roots are nearby, and they will suck the water out faster than these new trees. And so because of that, we don't recommend you do it, or if you are going to do it, then you have to take extra precautions for extra water on those trees and nutrients, because that tree will also take all the nutrients out of the soil before the cedar even has a chance at it. The last reason that cedars would die, it's animal damage. Deer, or most common in subdivisions, is going to be Fido, the dog next door. He does his business on the closest thing to the sidewalk, or his favorite tree in your backyard, whatever. So dogs will do a lot of damage to cedars, as well as deer. Mice don't do any damage to cedars, or rats. Those are not issues. There is a new friend that we have in the area now. They're called voles, and they're not very discriminatory. They eat everything when they're in the ground. They will go underneath a tree and they will just eat up the roots. And so that is a possibility sometimes that those will kill cedars. However, it's not a huge problem, not that common. Number one, roots. Number two, watering. If you get those two, you shouldn't have any problems. Now, just to elaborate a little bit on root balls, root pruning is very important. And this method is when the plant is out in the field, you cut back the roots, leaving it in the ground. By cutting back the roots while it's in the ground, you don't stress the tree out, and the remaining roots, which is now a smaller root ball, can grow additional fibers to sustain that tree. And this has to be done at the right time of the year. Again, it's a method which most people are getting away from because of the additional cost, and unfortunately, our economy is dictated by price, and there's always pressure to get the cost down, and growers will do whatever they have to get the price down, so to meet the contract with their retailers. Handling is another problem with the root ball. If the people that are involved moving them around on the farms, onto the trucks, at the garden center, etc., if they're not careful with the root ball, you can crack the root ball, especially with the balled and burlap varieties. Okay, so you have to be very careful when you're handling, as a customer, the root balls. As far as our end goes, what we do is we handle them. We've identified 8 locations where we handle them from the farm to our garden center, and every person that's involved in moving that is required to check the root ball at every stage to make sure that it's 100% intact. And should we find anything, we will remove it. We will not sell that particular tree. We do not want any failures with our customers. However, I'm not saying everybody else is doing that. It's a little bit laborious to be doing, but again, we'd rather have a tree die here than in a customer's backyard. And finally, storage of the root ball. Balled and burlap requires some extra precautions before they're planted in terms of their moisture, and we go through that in detail with you when you make the purchase. In this photo, we show an 8-foot pot-grown emerald. Now, our definition of pot-grown is different than some of the other growers or garden centers. When we say pot-grown, that means that it was grown in a field initially. It was then root pruned while it was in the field every year. When we finally do dig up the root ball, we ball and burlap it. In every case, no exception, even if they're not going to be sold until the fall. The ones that are sold in the spring, which is the majority of the cedars, those are balled and burlapped, and the customer buys them balled and burlapped. A root ball on a tree like this weighs about 100 pounds when it's balled and burlapped. What we also do is we keep a supply of these for fall sales. These are the exact same trees, balled and burlapped, but we put them into a larger plastic pot with a transitional soil around that balled and burlapped root ball. We do not disturb the root ball in any way. We do not remove the burlap material. It will disintegrate by early May, middle of May. It's already not there anymore as far as the roots are concerned. They'll go right through it. And again, we use a lot of bone meal, which is an organic root stimulant. And then we will sell these in September. So it's the exact same trees, except you're actually getting even a larger root ball in September. Of course, they will cost more than if you were to buy the exact same size tree in the springtime because there's less work involved. However, both methods are good, but if you're going to do it in September, if that's because of your schedule or whatever, you don't have an option of doing it in the springtime, this is the best way of doing it. However, it's going to cost you probably 10 or 15% more than the exact same size plant would cost in late April or early May. In this slide, we have a root ball that's inverted, and you can see that the roots are starting to wrap around the outside of that root ball. This is what you should see whenever you take a root ball out of a plastic pot. If you don't see roots wrapping around the outside of that root ball, what you may have is a plant that doesn't have a root ball that can sustain it. So be sure that whenever you purchase something that you do have roots around the outside of that root ball. In this case, in any other case where you do have the proper roots like wrapped around it, you need to scratch up those roots and loosen them up. If you plant this root ball or any other root ball with roots that are established into the ground without loosening up the roots, they will continue to grow in that particular shape that they're in right now and ultimately strangle out the tree itself. And we will show that to you in the next video or next slide. If you take a look at this slide that we have here, this is what will happen if you do not loosen the roots on a plastic potted plant. If the roots are starting to wrap around the outside as they should be, and that's what you want to see, However, if you don't loosen those roots up, they will just continue to grow in that tight circle and eventually strangle the plant out. So it's very important that you do loosen the roots up for any plastic potted grown plant. Again, you do not touch this or the root system on a balled and burlap plant. You don't even remove the burlap on a balled and burlap plant. You plant the entire root system with the material left on the root ball. And once it's planted, then you would just loosen up the material that's tight around the trunk of the tree. Now, one method that we do not recommend, this is the dig, shake, and pot method. Very commonly used by the big box stores initially, going back 10 or 15 years, and this is how a lot of cedars got a bad reputation as having a high failure rate. The actual plants were fine, it's just a method of how they were cultivated. And this method, which is still going on today, used by big box stores as well as even some of the reputable garden centers and growers, is to grow the plants out in the field, which is good. They dig them, which is not a problem, except that they dig a small root ball. And then they shake what dirt is left on that root ball off before transporting it. This does a couple of things. It reduces the size of the plant that the people have to handle in the way of that root ball, which is the major part of transporting cedars. More than 50% the cost of a cedar is actually transportation. So if you can get that weight down from, say, 80 or 90 pounds down to 10 or 15 pounds, you're saving a dramatic amount of money in terms of transporting them, because you can put 20,000 cedars into a transport truck. It's the weight that's going to restrict you from how many you can put into a transport truck. With a proper root ball, you're only going to get about 500 at the most, versus say 10 to 20,000, depending on how much you want to cram them into the trailer. Now, this method, again, used to be restricted only to gardens or to big box stores. And they initiated this probably 10 or 15 years ago, giving the cedars a bad reputation. However, because of competition, a lot of the reputable garden centers have followed in this path, at least to offer that to their customer. They're offering the same plants at the more competitive pricing. However, the problem is the same. It doesn't matter whether you buy them from a big box store or from a reputable garden center. If you've got bad roots, you've got bad roots. Where you buy them is not going to change the quality of that plant. The difference is that these plants will normally sell from $15 to $20 a piece for, say, a 5-footer or a 6-footer at the big box stores. The same plant may be selling for as high as $80 at a reputable garden center, because of the perception that it's a better plant, when in reality it's the exact same plant. And some of the garden centers have gotten around the losses by bringing them in, selling them retail at $70, $80, but having them on sale, 50% off, for example, at $35. Big blowout sale, etc. And then there's no warranty because they're on sale. And this eliminates totally their losses. Yet the customer, number one, has a dead plant, and number two, is paid twice as much as they would have if it was from a big box store. So keep that in mind when you're shopping around. Root cultivation is everything. Before you buy any particular plant, especially cedars, make sure you ask the salespeople what type of method was used in cultivating the root system, and make your decision based on that. We strongly recommend not using sprinklers to water cedars or any type of trees, actually, because they do not penetrate the ground very deep. Sprinklers are designed to go down about an inch or so into the soil, which works fine for grass, but is terrible for any type of tree or shrub. With trees and shrubs, what you want is the water to go through the entire root system, past the root system, and down deeper. This way the roots will train themselves to follow the water down, and that is where they anchor themselves. The roots will go down deeper, they'll be able to access more water, and it will create a stronger plant, not only in the short run, but in the long run. When you water with sprinklers, the water stays at the surface or near the surface, and the roots of the plant will actually come up to the surface. And any period without water, say for example a little bit of a drought or a little bit of a heat wave, those trees will be extremely stressed and may die. I'd say that a majority of the problems we have ever had with cedars, people were relying on sprinklers to water the plants. Do not rely on sprinklers. Go with a direct type system, either a soaker hose or manually watering each tree with a slow trickle. But you have to get down to the bottom of the roots with the water, or you're going to have problems guaranteed. Not that common a problem, but cedars can be planted improperly, just like any plant, in which case that will cause them to fail. We do have an info video on how to plant cedars and other trees, etc., and it's something you definitely want to take a look at before you get into planting the trees themselves. The exception with cedars is the timing. They can't be planted at any time of the year like some other trees can be. We really encourage you to plant your cedars end of April, first part of May. If the weather is cooperating throughout May, you can probably plant them right into the middle of May. These are for the balled and burlapped. After that, we really encourage you to wait until the first week in September and then only plant pot-grown cedars. Location is very important with respect to cedars. They have to have a minimum of 4 hours of sun, good drainage, they can't sit in water for very long, and not be near large established trees. The last element that may damage or hurt your cedars are deers or other animals. Deer will like to eat cedars and they can do quite a bit of damage. Dogs, on the other hand, they don't eat the cedars, but they do their business on them, and that will also kill a cedar. Very seldom you could see a rabbit chew on the bottom of a cedar during a very cold winter. However, very rare, not likely, as it is not likely to see a mouse do any damage to a cedar. They just don't like the taste. It's not sweet enough, obviously. And so you generally don't see any rodent type damage on cedars. Deer, they like the leaves, and Fido likes to leave his mark on them. So you can use chicken wire if you like to keep them away from the tree trunk itself and the root system. As long as you've got it wrapped around about 2 feet away, the dog's not going to do much damage to the tree, nor will the deer be able to get close to them. Now you have to ask yourself some important questions when you're starting to make your decision as to which cedar to go with. The first one, it's pretty simple but very important, and that is, do you want to create privacy or do you just want a separation point? And how quickly does your soil drain? You have to answer this question because it's so critical. As we said before, the main reason cedars fail is because of the roots. We'll take care of the roots. When you come to us, you're going to get a good root system. You don't have to worry about that. The next thing is watering them properly. We can't do that for you. That falls under your responsibility, but we will guide you every step of the way to make sure you do it right. And the first step is to check your soil to see how well it drains. The best way to actually check the soil is by digging a hole in preparation for your cedars and fill it with water. Make note how long it takes to drain completely, and share the information with us when you come in and talk to us about the cedars, and we'll work out a schedule for you on how often you should be watering based on how quickly your holes drain. Also, is the area where you're going to be planting the cedar a low spot relative to the rest of the area? Does water puddle up in this area after a rain? Is it in the back of a new subdivision? Many of these new subdivisions, their backyards taper down to a center point where it gives it a common drainage between the two backyards. And people will plant down that low area because they want to get some privacy from their neighbor. This low area, generally water accumulates there. So you have to keep that in mind. And even if you were to plant upslope from the bottom, you still may have a watering issue, because if it's hard clay, the water runs over the surface and it will fall into the first batch of soft soil that it has, which is going to be around your new trees. And even though you get a half an inch of rain, you may have 2 feet of water in that hole, because your whole backyard acts like a roof, and the water runs down that slope and it drops down into the hole around the root ball that you've just prepared for that new plant. And then that tree may be sitting in water for long periods of time if you've got heavy soil. So you have to be able to monitor how much water is sitting down there, and we go through that in our other videos where we talk about watering your plants. Here's a side sketch of, say, a backyard with a slope to it. The green down line is your backyard. At the very bottom you'll see there's a blue line, and this is where the water is going to end up accumulating. Again, if you were to plant upslope on that line, that green line, and you dig a hole down, the water would now accumulate inside that hole. Even though it's not the lowest point in the backyard, relatively it is the lowest point, because you've got the soft soil that allows the water to drain down to the bottom of that soil until it hits the hard soil at the bottom of your hole. One way to get around that, if you're planting up a slope, is if you want to imagine this, you're up in the air looking down on your backyard. The hole is the blue hole there with the word hole in the center is what you've prepared for your new plant, and just above that is a half moon. And the idea of that half moon is to prepare a dam or a diversion for the water that's running down the slope of your backyard, which is the blue arrows. Those blue arrows, when they get to that dam, will now bounce off it to the side, run past the hole. So rather than running down into the hole, they're running past the hole, and this way the hole doesn't overfill with water, keeping the root system too wet for too long. Make note if you have any downspouts that are coming towards the new plants that you're putting in, because if you do have a downspout, you have to keep in mind that the water from that roof area is all going to come down into a very small concentrated area, and that area is going to be a lot wetter than what you would expect, especially compared to the rest of the yard, which will be much drier. So despite people believing that cedars want to be wet all the time, they really don't want to be wet all the time. They want to be lightly moist all the time, but not sitting in water. It's just like a human being. If they sat or were below water for too long a period of time, they would suffocate, and so would the roots of cedars or any other plants. There are very few plants that can actually sit in water for any period of time. Some hydrangea varieties can tolerate water for long periods of time, but generally speaking, most plants cannot. So if you see areas like this in your backyard, that is an area where water is accumulating for one reason or another. It might be a low point, there might be a downspout from your house, your neighbor's house, runoff from a driveway, a patio, etc. But that's a red flag right there. Here's a beautiful patio, probably about 100 feet across from the grass up towards the house. And keep in mind that there's probably a downward slope on that patio towards the grass. And what's going to happen when it rains, if you get a half an inch of rain, which is that's a pretty good rain, all that water that's falling down the patio is going to accumulate as it runs down the slope and then just drop off the edge. So at the very edge of this patio, you're not going to get half an inch of rain. You're going to get 2 feet of rain, literally, coming down in that one small area. So that area is going to get very wet, and if there isn't good drainage, if it's not real sandy soil, and most people don't have real sandy soil, that water is going to sit there for quite a while. And if you've got really heavy clay, it could end up being wet permanently. So again, test holes are very important to keep an eye on what's going on with drainage, but this is a red flag easily seen on a basic site inspection. And keep this in mind when you're looking around your backyard, patios, driveways, etc. They are all going to have runoff, and they multiply the amount of water that is present along the edge there where you may be placing plants. Now, salting is very common on sidewalks and driveways, etc. Obviously, the benefit is that it eliminates the ice, makes it a safer walking surface. However, plants do not like salt. There is no plant that likes salt. Some plants will tolerate it better than others. We encourage you to use absolutely no salt around any of the plants, regardless. However, if there's a situation where there may be a minimal amount of salt that you just can't prevent because of a road or a sidewalk, etc., you're best to use black cedars. They can tolerate salt. Again, they don't like it, but they can tolerate some salt, and you'll have better results with them because the salt will kill most plants. So don't waste your money on the plants or the time of planting them. If you plan on using salt, don't even put them in there. So don't plant your cedars near any large trees. Keep in mind the canopy that's above the ground there, the leaves, down below, that's about how far the roots will spread out. And at the very edges, it's quite thin, but they will still suck up a lot of water right to the edge of that canopy. So anything planted underneath that canopy is going to be in competition with a much, much larger tree that's going to have a lot more success. A typical large tree will suck up 100 to 200 gallons of water a day, believe it or not. And any cedar that's in that area is going to have a hard time getting its water or the nutrition that it needs to do well. Not to mention it's probably in the shade also if it's underneath that canopy. Now, how would you describe the wind in your area? Keep this in mind and bring that information with you when you come down, because it will affect on what variety of cedars we may recommend to you, or to give you some strategies on how to prevent wind damage. Generally speaking, if it's a very congested subdivision, you're going to have protection one way or another. But even within subdivisions, with a lot of houses and trees around already, what you could get is some very concentrated wind tunnels between the homes. The homes nowadays might be as close as 6 or 8 feet apart from each other, and you're going to have all that wind being diverted around the edge of the house and down that wind tunnel. So you can have some pretty strong winds, even in, say, a protected subdivision area. A wooden fence along where your cedars are going to be is usually a good idea. It reduces the wind through the plant itself, as well as providing a little bit of shade to the ground. So during the hot summer months, it does keep the ground a little bit cooler. Now be sure you're getting at least 4 hours of full direct sun for your cedars. Some plants can tolerate a lot of shade, or all shade actually, such as boxwoods or yews. Those are nice evergreens if you've got very shady areas. However, cedars must have at least 4 hours of full sun every day. Now, just a quick summary of the requirements for cedars. Again, every specific variety will have its own needs, and we'll go over that with you when you come in. But as a guideline, 4 hours of direct sun minimum, good drainage. They prefer not to be in windy areas. Plant them away from large trees, and regular watering is a must. It's not an option, and never use sprinklers. Now, having talked about cedars for the last bit here, I do want to bring to your attention that there are options besides cedars. Cedars are a common one, again, because of cost and how quickly they grow. However, depending on your situation, you may want to look at some of the alternatives. Yews are probably the closest alternative to a cedar in that they're evergreens. They grow reasonably quickly, not as fast as a cedar, but they do grow reasonably quickly. The benefit of the yews is two. One, they can tolerate pretty dry conditions. They don't need the watering attention that a cedar requires. And they will also take full 100% shade. Yews and boxwoods can be planted full sun, full shade. It doesn't matter where you plant them. And in particular, we supply a lot of yews, probably 50% of all that we sell, to the Rosedale area in Toronto, which, if you're familiar with, is a very heavily treed area, and cedars just will not do well there. So a lot of our customers from that location do purchase yews off of us, and they do very well. Again, they just don't have the sun to support cedars. They go with the yews. Yews do have a richer look to them. They're definitely a nicer looking plant, but they are going to cost you more than a cedar. Boxwoods can also make a hedge, as they will grow up to 10 feet tall, except it takes about 100 years to get there. Boxwoods are basically recommended for people that want something 4 feet height maximum or less, very often only 2 feet or even a foot high. Boxwoods are very good for that. They're extremely trimmable, and because of that, they do make a nice hedge, but they grow slowly, so you're not going to get a 8 or 10 foot hedge in your lifetime. If that's what your goal is, you need to go with a cedar or a yew. Now, yews and boxwoods, cedars, those are evergreens. When you get to things like privets and some other deciduous shrubs, they're either not evergreen, then meaning they're deciduous, they lose their leaves, or they're semi-evergreens. Some of the privet varieties will keep some of their leaves some winters, depending on how cold it is, but they're not considered an evergreen. There's also things such as euonymus, etc., that are shrubs you could use for hedges. They may not get as large as what you'd like. Columnar trees, we've got a good selection of different columnar trees, columnar maples, columnar oaks, and they can be used for providing privacy at extreme heights very quickly. In other words, if you need a block at 12 or 14 feet, we can supply columnar trees. They're deciduous. Their leaves are going to fall off in the winter, but during the summer months, which is when people care most about privacy, it's almost instantaneous because of their size. So with a lot of these subdivisions that are built close together and two-story homes, etc., patios, balconies, these trees can provide you privacy very quickly during those summer months at a reasonable cost. The drawback of the columnar trees is A, the leaves fall off in the winter, which is not an issue for some people, and B, they provide very little privacy at the lower portion of the trunk, with the exception of the columnar oaks, also called English oaks, pyramidal oaks. These ones here, they start very low to the ground and go up, so they can actually provide privacy from about a foot or two off the ground. You can use spruce trees if you like. These are evergreens or pines. The drawback for them is that they need to have some room, and they're not as quick growing as a cedar. Also, spruce trees for the most part are Christmas shaped, and so that there's a void at the top. You don't get that privacy for quite a while. Junipers are another variety similar to cedars. We don't sell that many junipers, given the fact that they tend to be more expensive than a cedar. They do have more color choices. You can go from green to blue with your junipers, as well as different textures. However, they are going to cost you more. And the other problem with them is they tend to look a little ratty very early in their life compared to a cedar. Cedar will look good for 40, 50 years. Junipers, sometimes they start looking ratty in 5 or 6 years. They can start to look a little brown on the inside. It shows, and it's not very attractive. So keep that in mind with junipers. Generally, they don't make a nice privacy hedge. They're more of a separation point. But if you have to have something blue, then junipers are the way to go, because you don't have any other option. Another option for you with respect to providing a hedge separation point would be grasses. It's probably the least expensive method, but keep in mind that you have to cut them down to the ground every spring, and then you start all over again. So you really don't even have anything there until halfway into the summer. So you're not going to have the privacy during some of the months where you would like to have it. Again, grasses are not expensive, but they also don't give you that much privacy if that's what you're looking for. Here's some 4-foot Hills yews. Different varieties of yews. Hills and Hicks, very similar. Hicks have a red berry, Hills don't. Hills tend to be a little bit fuller. We also have some spreading varieties such as Dense. Here's a nice boxwood hedge. This is probably about 18 inches tall. Here's a privet hedge, just a point of emphasis. It looks like an evergreen, but it's not. Most winters you will lose all your leaves. Some winters you might only lose some of your leaves. But in our climate, you very seldom have all your leaves through the winter with a privet hedge. It does have a nice fragrance. I should mention that. It's very aromatic. Here is a row of columnar trees, deciduous trees. In this particular case, these are Armstrong maples. Other choices could be ornamental pear, hornbeam. English oak is one of our biggest sellers for deciduous trees. In fact, it's a deciduous tree, but it keeps its leaves in the wintertime. They go brown, and the majority of the leaves will stay on through the winter, and then they'll fall off in the spring. The same is true for some of the beech varieties. They will keep some of their leaves. They'll go brown. They'll die, the leaves, but they don't fall off until the springtime. Here's a spruce tree. Some upright junipers. The last of the alternatives to the cedars being tall grasses. These come in a range of sizes, colors, different plumes, etc. This particular variety is called Gigantus, and it grows well over 15 feet tall. Just a point again that you do have to cut these down to the ground every springtime, and then you'll have to wait for them to grow back up by the middle of summer before you get to their full size height. You can reach this particular height, like in this photograph, which is about 12 feet. It generally takes about 2 to 3 years for the actual grass to have a rootstock that will generate this by the end of the summertime.
We do offer our retail customers the option of purchasing wholesale, assuming that they meet the minimum requirement of plants. Now, to get any type of wholesale arrangement, you have to buy at least 20 of the same variety and same size plant. And for most homeowners, we won't even suggest that you go that way, won't even bring it up probably. because that 15% that you're saving is not worth losing our 5-year warranty or not getting our bone meal and getting mulch and fertilizer at no cost. You have to buy those separately, so it's probably not worth your effort to even consider it. This is generally mostly attractive for people that are flipping houses. They're looking very short term in terms of the plants, and they want to get the lowest price regardless. So they will often opt for that. Even 15% off, they'll take it regardless of what it means in terms of the warranty, etc. But for most homeowners, we would not recommend you take that. Once you start getting over 30 plants or more, now it's something you may want to start considering because it becomes more attractive with the larger volumes, all the way up to 40% off when you're purchasing 100 or more. I do want to point out that once you get over the 35% or 30% to 40%, you have to put the order in before March 1st, as we pre-dig all of our plants in March for our April sales, and we need to have the larger numbers like that cemented and confirmed before March 1st. Now, wholesale pricing does not include the 5-year warranty, the root stimulant, the mulch, or the fertilizer. In addition to that, the wholesale deliveries are only done directly off the back of the truck and directly onto the ground. Retail deliveries, we can place them anywhere you want on the property, up to 150 feet away from the unload location of the truck. For more details, you can either email us or look at the website for more information.
Our customers come from across Ontario to purchase plants. Because of the distance, we really encourage them to be prepared when they come down here with all their information. This way they only have to make one trip and they can actually leave with their plants on their first visit. The best way to do this is to first visit your own local garden centers to see what is available in your area. This will familiarize you with the different varieties that are available, size options, and pricing. If you come down with all that information in terms of the type of plants you like, the sizes that you're looking for, then we can work with the information about your own particular property to make sure that you're getting the right plants for that location. And what you want to do is come down with a sketch of the area where you want to plant. In that sketch, you should include things such as the measurements, show the sidewalks, patios, driveways, etc. Identify any low-lying areas and slopes. Make note of sun and wind exposure. Also draw in any location of large trees in the area. If you come see us with that information, then we will work with you, and in a very short period of time you can make a decision which way you want to go in terms of the variety, size, etc. And we do carry over 1,000 varieties of plants, so when you see what we have here, you may actually change your mind. But we will show you what the options are based on the type of conditions you have at your area, and we will recommend plants that will do well under those conditions. If you're going to come and take the plants with you, if your plan is to take them with you that day, make sure that you come with either an enclosed trailer or van, which is the best for evergreens because you protect them from the wind on the way home. If you're coming in with an open vehicle, you should bring tarps and straps with you to protect them from the wind. And if you need, we can deliver it to anywhere in Ontario. Proper planting materials are key to success. While most garden centers will try to sell this to you during checkout, we believe it's so important that we will provide it at no cost with minimum plant purchases. So for example, from $50 to $200 of net plant purchases, you would receive the most important additive, which is the root stimulant. This is what helps your roots to get established during that very crucial first year, and it's the foundation of your plant going forward. From $200 to $400 in net value of plants, you would receive the root stimulant as well as real cedar mulch. The real cedar mulch is provided to help keep the roots cool in the summer, warm in the winter, assist in retaining moisture throughout the year. In addition, it helps to control weeds and discourages insects. $400 to $5,000, you would receive the previous as well as a commercial grade time release fertilizer. This is pretty amazing fertilizer in that it releases based on the temperature of the air as well as the amount of precipitation that the fertilizer is exposed to. So unlike some of the cheaper fertilizers which just give you a quick jolt of fertilizer which could actually damage the plant, this time release fertilizer is basically controlled on what the plant needs as it needs it. At $5,000 and over, you receive the same as the previous amounts, In addition, you have another year's supply of the good quality time-release fertilizer. We provide the fertilizers to you during the year that you require them. The reason for this is to keep them fresh so that they retain their full effectiveness. In all cases, if you're planting hedges, we will provide inspection pipes for free, as well as a site inspection if we're doing deliveries. And the site inspection is done during the time of the delivery. Happy gardening from all of us at Save on Plants. Thank you for visiting our website, and if you have any more questions, you can email us at the email address below. As well, be sure to watch our other info videos, especially the ones on planting and watering, to ensure your success. Thank you, and enjoy the season.